Welcome back. Today we are talking with Charlie Maclean-Bristol about future risks. Great first and second segment there, Charlie. Do you have any more thoughts or anything to finish on with the topic on cyber threats?
I think, we talked to the high level cyber threat. I think we have to acknowledge that the cyber attack, the cyber threats, we can do a reasonable amount to try and protect ourselves. And I think the really well protected organizations are less likely to be attacked, though, they can take the NSA and some of the American government organizations, then everyone is vulnerable. But I think we just have to recognize the sheer um, impact, the value taken out of organizations by cyber attacks. If you get some big attacks, we're seeing some attacks in Scotland here, environmental protection agencies, some local authorities, and it takes years to recover, you know, and all that management time and effort where they were going to improve services, change that, radicalize that, it all goes. Everything is consumed in just the recovery. So you're not going places, you're just trying to recover to go back there. So I think we had to just recognize the impact of those and say, we need to be prepared for them. But if they get in, I think our management have to the psyche say this is weeks and months, not hours and days to recover there. So I think we need to recognize this and we need to make sure our managers know that. I think there is also some of these more nation state attacks, which can do message like the WannaCry or the NotPetya attacks, so which can cause massive damage. One of those hasn't happened since 2017, so we're maybe less vulnerable to those. But we mustn't forget the utility attacks as well. So there have been some attempts at utility attacks on water companies in the States. Allegedly, the Iranians have been trying to do some utility attacks. We've seen the Russian attacks on the Ukrainian grid before the war, and again with this hybrid warfare, are we going to see pushing at this, pushing at this? We'll just try and see how far we can go before the nation take back. With critical infrastructure attacks, then we start to get into the NATO Article 5 items. So I think the companies that are kind of pushing this are kind of slightly nervous about that. But one thing we haven't really seen, unless I've missed it, is nation states on data providers. So your Amazon, your Azure's. We've seen things in utility grid, but we know that all our businesses run on Amazon data centers, Azure data centers. They are critical infrastructure, and the massive amount of damage, if you can actually flatten one of those things electronically or physically, the damage it would cause to all of our businesses, you were talking about your Rogers incident, the damage it would cause to those would be pretty catastrophic. So I think we just again have to be just aware these things will happen, and we need to be primed to think about how much can we do manual workarounds, or are we going to sit in our hands and say, if you're something like bookings.com, they don't have a business without a platform. So you just have they will just have to try and make sure they're very resilient, because all they can do is recover after that. There's no manual workaround. But for other businesses, there are manual work again. So I think that cyber threats is an ongoing threat, and probably the biggest risk for a lot of us or a lot of organizations.
Yeah, you mentioned Amazon and utilities. Amazon is like a public utility now.
Yeah,
It's you may see it as a third-party vendor, but really, because they do have so many data centers and so much business data housed and going through within them, they are a utility now.
yeah,
They've moved from one to the other.
yeah. And we've just had them declared as critical infrastructure in the UK. So, you know, that we're seeing the importance there.
Yeah. So in our last 10 minutes, let's talk about the fifth risk you identified, business changes.
I think this is where I say is there is, and these always change, some of these sort of shifts in morality where 20 years ago, kind of some of the Me Too, Black Lives Matter have never been acceptable ever. but there is probably a greater acceptance on and less ability to speak out. And we've had a number of cases there, which was a classic case of Mohammed Al Fayed, who was the owner of Harrods, very famous store in the UK. His son was married to Lady Di, so he's kind of pretty well connected. Dead now, but now he's died, there's been lots of exposés of him sort of grooming and having all these office staff and rapes and kind of sexual assaults and all that on his staff, which, that's still about one man. But there's also the problem for the organization, if we're thinking crisis management here, of all the people who facilitated that. So it wasn't just one man who got away with it. There was lots of people who did the hiring. There was doctors who did the sort of kind of really nasty, horrible kind of checking of these new employees way beyond what medical examinations required for a shop worker kind of things. And there was all the people who knew about it and brushed it under the carpet, or it's on the too difficult pile, and then it comes out. And then organizations, and it could be for the Harris organizers, being sold on to other people, and this didn't take part on their tenure, but it is how do you deal with that in sort of crisis management. We've seen, was on the news yesterday, McDonald's has got problems with, in the UK, of managers abusing their position as towards staff, and, sort of sexual favors for extra shifts kind of stuff. And there was a case that sort of about a year ago came telling, and now it's raised it because people said, they haven't done anything about it. So these are all crises. We had an Archbishop of Canterbury, one of the highest in the Church of England, had to resign because of historically there was sort of priests doing unmentionable things, and they moved them on and didn't report it to the police and just stuck it on the too difficult pile and didn't want to affect the reputation of the church, and now it all comes out. So there is quite a lot on here is these sort of morality changes with the morality, there's a whole the trans debate, the woke debate, and where things that either brushed under the carpet or never were acceptable but tolerated now are unacceptable and untolerated. And then somebody comes out and say, well, we had quite a guy who did a whole load of master chefs, and say like he did inappropriate comments and make people feel uncomfortable on his shows, and one person comes out and a whole load comes out about it, and then he doesn't deal with it very well, plus the press. But these things historically have happened, and now they're suddenly coming up here. And crisis managers and organizations, maybe they had no part in these things, but they're having to deal with it at a crisis. Or maybe it's your brand ambassador, or maybe it was your CEO. So the sort of change in morality, and new things become, which maybe never acceptable, brushed under the carpet, now become a lot mainstream. And then we in crisis management, we have to deal with it, and morality changes and things change. And we see in the state the sort of kickback against sort of woke thinking. And where does that lead us back? Does all these things go full circle? The deplatforming of people with unacceptable views, where do we end up in that? And CEOs wading into. There was a CEO who did I was just reading it this morning about it's an op-ed piece after the guy in the healthcare was murdered, and he wrote a piece in the New York in one of the papers about, and he didn't talk enough about the poor guy that was murdered. He talked about how all about healthcare, and was very routinely panned, and a lot of comments, and had to close it down. So companies, when they get involved in kind of morality, can come a cropper if you try and have your view on it, and you find everyone piles in because your view doesn't time right, or you're just clumsy, or you're just crass is often these things. So I think we just have to have our antennas up, and we're not at our level going to be able to stop the CEO golfing and doing something. If they come to us, we can advise them not to do that, or that's not a good idea. But often position as sort of practitioners are, we're not even get that high up. But I think we need to recognize that these more sort of morality issues can come back to haunt us. And again, how are we prepared? How can we think about it? How do we get on the front foot? What is the way to deal with them? So I think that is so that's the first bit of my sort of business change there.
I do like what you said there, the morality piece there. We've only got 3 minutes left, but I just want to get this comment in before I hand it back to you for final thoughts. I was talking about contingencies with a client a little while ago, and they said we have to make sure our billing is up and running. We're able to send out invoices, during a crisis and disaster. I said, be careful. I said, because it may look like you're trying to fund your recovery. So be careful. If people can't get a hold of you or can't get money from you, but you're sending out invoices, that's not going to look good for you. So be very careful. Think about this. So, but now that I've said that,
I think the other changes going to come our way, and this is a whole new podcast or 10, is artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, and quantum computing are going to accelerate the change in our world. Probably for the better, but it's going to make an awful lot of changes, and things that Kodak, Polaroid, I rest my case, they are no longer with us, or not with us because they lost the industry there. So I think we need to be very much aware of changes within our organization. That's more not our job as practitioners. It is the CEO. But I think to sum up very quickly, I think we live in a more dangerous world. I think our kind of assumptions we are planning on need to be revisited. We need to make sure we're prepared as far as we can. We need to be as resilient as possible, but we need to be able to respond, and we need to have people with the right mindset and the right training to be able to respond whatever the long list the world throws at us.
Right. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of today's show. Charlie, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas and things that we need to take away and consider about future risks. I really do appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
Good. And have a good day.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will probably be a third time soon at some point too as well.
No problem at all.
Everyone watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.